The Old West, a lawless frontier and unforgiving landscape where life hung by a thread. It was a time when gunslingers ruled, outlaws defied justice, and vigilante lawmen patrolled with a revolver and grit. Welcome to a world where survival required skill and reputation was earned through steel and gunpowder. These men and women weren't just quick on the draw. They were legends, some feared, some revered, but all unforgettable. Number 1, William Curly Bill Brocius. William Curly Bill. Brocius was a complex figure in the Old West, feared for his ruthlessness and unpredictability, yet at times also a person with a twisted sense of humor and loyalty. Brocius was an influential leader of the Cowboy Gang, a loosely organized group infamous for cattle rustling, robberies, and ambushes across southern Arizona. Often described as one of the most accurate shots among his peers, Brocius could reportedly shoot out candle flames without breaking the glass, or even hit quarters held between a volunteer's fingers, feats that cemented his legend as a skilled but dangerous gunslinger. One of Brocius's more notorious actions occurred on March 8, 1881, in a saloon where a fellow cowboy, Dick Lloyd, was causing a ruckus by riding his horse indoors. Displeased by Lloyd's antics, Brocius and others reportedly shot Lloyd, though the bar owner later took the blame and was acquitted. This incident showcases the chaotic environment of Tombstone, where violence often erupted over seemingly trivial disputes. Brocius's rivalry with the Earp brothers escalated after the infamous OK Corral shootout in 1881. Though not directly involved in that gunfight, Brocius harbored a deep grudge against the Earps, particularly after Wyatt Earp's brother, Morgan, was assassinated in early 1882, a crime that many suspected Brocius helped orchestrate. This vendetta reached its peak when Wyatt Earp formed a posse to hunt down Cowboy Gang members, ultimately confronting Curly Bill at Iron Springs, or Cottonwood Springs, on March 24, 1882. During the ensuing shootout, Earp reportedly fired a shotgun blast that nearly split Brocius in two, though some contemporary accounts questioned whether Brocius truly died that day. Rumors persisted that he had survived, even fleeing to Mexico, though no confirmed sightings followed. Brocius's legacy remains a blend of confirmed violence and legendary rumors, marking him as one of Tombstone's most notorious figures, whose life embodied the ruthless and lawless spirit of the Old West. His death, or disappearance, left a lasting mark on the outlaw lore surrounding Tombstone and the Earp vendetta, reinforcing his place in frontier history. Number 2. Sam Bass. Sam Bass's journey from cowboy to notorious outlaw started with modest beginnings, but soon turned into a crime spree that captured the public's imagination. Originally from Indiana, Bass moved to Texas in the early 1870s, first working as a farmhand and eventually operating a one-man stable. His initial foray into outlaw activities began with his Black Hills Bandits group, with which he led stagecoach heists across the Dakotas before shifting focus to Texas. In 1877, Bass and his gang made headlines by robbing a Union Pacific train in Big Springs, Nebraska, hauling in $60,000, an unprecedented sum at the time. This marked the largest heist in the railroad's history and secured his status as a legendary train robber. Yet, his bold crime spree was not without flaws. The gang frequently missed larger stashes during hurried robberies, leading some to suspect that nerves or alcohol impacted their methods. Despite their amateur mistakes, Bass and his crew became increasingly notorious in Texas, committing several train robberies along the Texas and Pacific Line in 1878. During these heists, his gang members faced numerous injuries, with Seaborn Barnes notably taking a bullet to the legs during one escapade. The public outcry against the robberies led the Texas Rangers to intensify their manhunt for Bass, initiating what became known as the Bass War. The Rangers relentlessly pursued him through Texas's rough terrain, with Bass using his knowledge of backwoods trails to evade capture. However, the game changed when gang member Jim Murphy, arrested by Rangers, betrayed Bass to secure a pardon. On July 19, 1878, the Rangers ambushed Bass in Round Rock, Texas, as he prepared for a bank heist. He was mortally wounded and died 2 days later on his 27th birthday, sealing his legacy as one of Texas's most infamous outlaws. Bass's story continues to intrigue historians, partly due to speculation about hidden loot. Some believe he buried part of his fortune in Texas, though no confirmed discovery has surfaced. His life exemplifies the Wild West's allure and the fierce consequences that often awaited those who embraced the outlaw path. Number 3. James Killer Miller. James Killer Miller, also known as Deacon Jim for his seemingly pious life, was one of the Old West's most chilling assassins. He cultivated an image of a calm, devout Methodist who shunned alcohol and tobacco, but underneath his church-going exterior, Miller was a brutal hitman for hire. His outward persona allowed him to blend into society without suspicion, a skill that enabled his deadly work across Texas and nearby territories for more than 2 decades. Miller often charged fees from $150 to $2,000 for his killings, with clients ranging from ranch owners to criminals. His methods were coldly calculated, usually involving ambushes at night. He became known for using a double-barrel shotgun, which he wielded with precision, allegedly taking down up to 50 targets, though confirmed records attribute 12 to 14 murders to him. One of Miller's most shocking killings was his ambush of Gus Bobbitt, a rancher and former U.S. Marshal, in 1909. Lying in wait by an oak tree, Miller shot Bobbitt as he rode by in a wagon, ensuring a gruesome demise. This murder ultimately led to Miller's downfall, as local citizens, enraged by his actions, formed a lynch mob. Captured and held in an Ada, Oklahoma jail, Miller, along with 3 co-conspirators, faced vigilante justice in a makeshift gallows. In his final moments, Miller defiantly requested his diamond ring be given to his wife and his hat be left on, famously declaring, "Let her rip," before stepping off the box. His story reflects the dark realities of a man who lived by his own twisted code of justice and secrecy, leaving behind a legacy as one of the most feared and elusive figures of the Wild West. Number 4. Belle Starr. Belle Starr, famously dubbed the Bandit Queen, led a life intertwined with the most notorious outlaws of her time. Born Mira Maybelle Shirley, she grew up during the Civil War era, where personal tragedy and loss pushed her towards outlaw circles. Her brother's death during a Union raid and the family's displacement to Texas contributed to her rebellious turn. In Texas, she married her first husband, Jim Reed, a gambler and occasional highwayman, with whom she participated in small-scale crimes and learned the art of evasion. After Reed's death, Belle joined forces with Sam Starr of the infamous Cherokee Starr family, settling in Indian Territory, where their home, Younger's Bend, became a hideout for outlaws like Jesse James. Together, they were convicted of horse theft by hanging Judge Isaac Parker, but received a relatively light sentence, 9 months in jail, likely due to Belle's charm and wit. Despite numerous arrests, she skillfully used her charisma to negotiate her way out of severe punishments. After Sam's death, she married Jim July Starr, a much younger Cherokee man, continuing her life of crime and maintaining Younger's Bend as a sanctuary for outlaws. Belle's life ended abruptly and mysteriously. In 1889, she was ambushed and shotgunned in the back near her home. Suspects included her son Eddie and estranged husband Jim July, but no one was ever convicted. Her legend grew posthumously largely shaped by sensational dime novels that exaggerated her life, transforming her into an Old West icon whose exploits continue to fascinate. Number 5. The Sundance Kid. The Sundance Kid, born Harry Alonzo Longabaugh in Pennsylvania, earned his infamous moniker after a stint in jail for horse theft in Sundance, Wyoming. His later partnership with Butch Cassidy became legendary, with the two forming the core of the Wild Bunch, a gang notorious for a string of successful train and bank robberies across the American West. Their daring exploits, which included large-scale heists from Union Pacific trains, cemented their reputation and made them prime targets for the Pinkerton National Detective Agency. Despite their notoriety, the gang frequently used cunning over violence, with Sundance himself reportedly only involved in one shootout in the U.S., where he allegedly wounded but did not kill any Pinkerton agents. In 1901, Sundance, Cassidy, and Sundance's companion, Etta Place, fled to South America to evade law enforcement. They initially attempted to live quietly as ranchers in Argentina, but soon resumed a life of crime, robbing banks and payrolls across Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile. Their final fateful encounter occurred in 1908 in San Vicente, Bolivia, after they were identified as suspects in a payroll heist. Bolivian authorities, closing in, engaged them in a fierce shootout, resulting in both outlaws' deaths. According to local accounts, Cassidy reportedly shot Sundance, who had been mortally wounded before turning the gun on himself. The bodies were buried in unmarked graves, leaving the exact details of their deaths murky. Rumors persisted, however, with family members and some historians asserting that Sundance and Cassidy might have survived the Bolivian encounter, returning to the United States under assumed names. Yet, when Bolivian graves were exhumed in 1991 for forensic analysis, no conclusive evidence linked the remains to the infamous duo, fueling the mystery surrounding Sundance's ultimate fate. This enduring ambiguity has since become a key element of his legend in Wild West history. Number 6. Butch Cassidy. Butch Cassidy, born Robert Leroy Parker in Utah, became a legendary outlaw not only for his robberies, but for the surprisingly strategic and charismatic methods he employed. He grew up in a Mormon family and initially worked on ranches across Utah, gaining skills that later helped him as a gang leader. His outlaw journey began with small crimes, but after meeting fellow criminal Mike Cassidy, he adopted his friend's last name, becoming Butch Cassidy, and embraced a life of high-profile heists. Cassidy's leadership style was unique. Known for his easygoing nature, he reportedly planned meticulously to avoid unnecessary violence, often choosing to flee rather than fight if law enforcement got too close. His Wild Bunch gang carried out a series of lucrative robberies, including the famous 1899 Union Pacific train robbery near Wilcox, Wyoming, where they outsmarted and evaded lawmen and Pinkerton agents repeatedly. Their base, the hole-in-the-wall hideout in Wyoming, allowed them to regroup and elude authorities in a remote, defensible location. As law enforcement pressure mounted in the early 1900s, Cassidy, along with the Sundance Kid and Sundance's partner Etta Place, fled to South America, where they briefly attempted ranching in Argentina. However, they soon resumed their criminal activities, staging several bank and payroll robberies across Argentina and Bolivia. Their final years were shadowed by relentless pursuit from lawmen and Pinkerton detectives. Although the most common account states that Cassidy and Sundance died in a shootout in Bolivia in 1908, evidence has been inconclusive, leading some family members and historians to believe Cassidy returned to the U.S. and lived under an alias until the 1930s. Cassidy's ability to charm even those on the side of the law, alongside his strategic planning and aversion to violence, earned him a reputation as a gentleman bandit and left a legacy marked by intrigue and speculation. Number 7. Cole Younger. Cole Younger's journey as an outlaw started with personal loss during the Civil War, which fueled his hatred for Union forces and propelled him toward a life of crime. The loss of his father to Unionist forces and the destruction of his family's home made him join William Quantrill's Raiders, a Confederate guerrilla group notorious for the brutal Lawrence, Kansas massacre in 1863. Younger's sharpshooting skills were honed in this violent setting, and he soon gained a fearsome reputation as an uncompromising fighter. After the war, Younger joined forces with the James brothers, forming the infamous James Younger Gang, which embarked on a spree of bank, train, and stagecoach robberies across the Midwest. Their targets were often banks affiliated with Union supporters, which gave their actions a veneer of Confederate justice. However, the gang's most notorious failure came in 1876 during a raid on the First National Bank in Northfield, Minnesota. Local townspeople, alerted to the robbery, ambushed Younger and his gang members, turning the streets into a chaotic battleground. Cole was gravely wounded in the shootout, sustaining multiple gunshot wounds, but survived long enough to be captured alongside his brothers, Jim and Bob, marking the end of his criminal exploits. Imprisoned for life, Cole spent nearly 25 years in Stillwater Prison in Minnesota, where he focused on reform, organizing one of the country's first prison newspapers and becoming a prominent figure advocating redemption. Paroled in 1901 and pardoned in 1903, Cole spent his final years as a lecturer, recounting his life's events and openly regretting his violent past. His memoir and lectures emphasized themes of loyalty and redemption, showing a complex man who, while deeply loyal to his family and Southern roots, ultimately renounced his outlaw life in search of peace. Number 8. John Wesley Hardin. John Wesley Hardin built his reputation as one of the most lethal gunslingers in the Old West, largely through a combination of extreme skill, a quick temper, and a personal code that justified his killings. Born into a Methodist family, he was involved in his first fatal shooting by age 15, allegedly in a fight with an ex-slave. This incident set off a career of violence in which he reportedly claimed the lives of dozens, though official records confirm far fewer deaths. Hardin was famous for his use of the border roll, a gunfighting maneuver that allowed him to draw his weapon with remarkable speed. This technique, paired with his willingness to escalate conflicts quickly, made him a figure of fear throughout Texas. Hardin's vendettas were not only personal, he was also embroiled in local feuds like the Sutton-Taylor feud, which pitted rival factions in Texas against each other in a blood feud fueled by political and economic disputes. During this conflict, he killed Jack Helm, a DeWitt County sheriff, further solidifying his outlaw status and placing him high on law enforcement's target list. Hardin avoided capture for years, even famously encountering Wild Bill Hickok in Abilene, Kansas, where they reportedly established an uneasy truce despite local tensions. By 1877, his notoriety led the Texas Rangers to track him down in Pensacola, Florida, where they captured him on a train after a brief struggle. Hardin was sentenced to 25 years in prison, but served 15, during which time he studied law, eventually becoming a licensed attorney upon release. Nevertheless, his violent past continued to haunt him, and he was shot and killed by a local lawman, John Selman, in 1895 during a bar confrontation, ending the life of a man whose actions embodied the chaotic justice of the Old West. Number 9. Billy the Kid. Billy the Kid, born Henry McCarty, became an outlaw in New Mexico under the alias William H. Bonney. Orphaned young and frequently moving, Billy's early years were unstable, setting the stage for his life on the run. His involvement in New Mexico's infamous Lincoln County War, a brutal conflict between rival business factions, solidified his image as an outlaw. Billy worked for John Tunstall, a rancher targeted by the House, a powerful business group backed by corrupt officials. Tunstall's murder ignited the feud, and Billy, who had been close to him, vowed revenge. Forming a group called the Regulators, Billy and his allies launched a campaign of retribution, killing those connected to Tunstall's death, including Sheriff William Brady, further increasing his notoriety. Despite receiving temporary amnesty, Billy returned to crime, his life defined by ongoing pursuits, arrests, and daring escapes. His boldest jailbreak occurred in April 1881 when he escaped from the Lincoln County Courthouse, killing 2 deputies in the process. The following months saw intense efforts to recapture him, culminating in his fatal confrontation with Sheriff Pat Garrett. Garrett, who had been tasked with capturing Billy, finally located him at Fort Sumner in July 1881 and killed him, though later years saw claims by several men, notably Brushy Bill Roberts, that Billy had survived. The kid's legacy endured as both a feared and romanticized figure. His life, though brief, represented the turbulent mix of loyalty, vengeance, and survival that marked the Old West. Number 10. Jesse James. Jesse James's transition from Confederate guerrilla to one of America's most infamous outlaws was shaped by his experiences during and after the Civil War. Raised in Missouri, a state divided by fierce Union and Confederate loyalties, Jesse and his older brother Frank joined Confederate bushwhackers like William Quantrill's Raiders. These guerrilla fighters targeted Union forces and sympathizers, engaging in ruthless, often personal warfare. Jesse's mentor, the violent Confederate leader Archie Clement, greatly influenced him. After the war, Jesse channeled his loyalty to the Confederate cause into a campaign of robberies, presenting himself as a rebel hero avenging the South. This calculated image made him a folk hero in Southern circles, despite his life of violent crime. Jesse led the James Younger gang in a series of audacious bank and train heists, often targeting Union-supportive institutions. Yet the gang's luck faltered in 1876 during a failed bank raid in Northfield, Minnesota, which left several gang members dead or captured. Afterward, Jesse restructured his gang, but became increasingly paranoid, trusting few, including his new recruits, Bob and Charlie Ford. Governor Thomas Crittenden sought to end Jesse's reign of crime, negotiating secretly with the Ford brothers, who were promised a reward and a pardon if they betrayed Jesse. On April 3, 1882, Jesse's guard was down as he adjusted a picture on the wall of his home. Bob Ford seized this moment, shooting him in the back of the head. Far from being hailed as heroes, the Ford brothers were vilified, viewed as cowards for betraying Jesse. Public backlash was so intense that Bob Ford's life became a series of struggles, facing both scorn and death threats, until he was ultimately killed in a revenge-fueled attack in 1892. Meanwhile, Jesse James's legend only grew, capturing the public imagination as a symbol of the Old West mix of defiance, violence, and myth.